This is Noise from the Cranium. My name is Doug, and in this episode, part 3 of my profile on Billy Cowsill, I'm going to take a look at what he was up to when he lived in Vancouver. In 2 previous episodes, I did an overview of Billy's career and talked to some folks he interacted with in Vancouver. In this episode, I dig further into those Vancouver years, look at the bands he played in, listen to the music he made there, and get some stories about those times. When Billy arrived in Vancouver, hot off his time in Edmonton playing in Brian Festukian's band, sometimes called the Hair Trigger Cowboys, he joined up with some local musicians who had just formed a band called Blue Northern. Alumni of several iconic 60s bands such as My Indle Ring, Mock Duck, Hydroelectric Streetcar, and the Northwest Company, Blue Northern rose from the ashes of the Cement City Cowboys. Gary Como, Lee Stevens, and Jim Wilson had all been in the Cement City Cowboys with Danny Mac. Adding Brady Gustafson on drums, Ray O'Toole and Billy on guitars, they began what would be a 5-year run, releasing an EP and an album during that time. Billy brought his years of experience to the band, producing the EP and co-producing the album. They sound spectacular.
Okay, gents, we're going to try this just with the drums and the guitars. Leroy, you lay out for just a little bit, and just want to check on a few little minute frequency things here. Hey, just a tad brighter, Jeff. Just a little more snap into it. Yeah, that even brings out a little more presence in the kick drum, too. Right. Just a little bit, just kind of a bit more, some more low mids in that guitar, just to spread it out a bit more. Sure. Perhaps we can put some effects on it later that will enhance that, but I want to use as few guitars on this thing as possible.
I produced the first EP because I had produced records before, okay? So I had a track record, and I knew what I was doing. Which didn't mean everybody else didn't know what they were doing, but I kind of remembered how to work an 8-track machine or something like that, right? So in this field, I guess I had the lead.
Their song Can't Make No Sense spent 9 weeks on the charts in Vancouver, making it to number 10.
And I can't make no sense out of loving you.
3 of the 4 singles released from their album made it into the top 40, and, as you would expect from Billy, they were a great live band. Guitarist of multi-platinum selling Vancouver rock band Prism and future Cowsill co-conspirator Lindsay Mitchell recalls meeting Billy for the first time.
I heard about this new band, Blue Northern, and that they've got a record out even, and this guy, Billy Cowsill, from the Cowsills, I was in North Vancouver, driving north, and this Hank Williams song comes on.
If he loved me half as much as I loved you, he wouldn't worry me half as much as you do.
And I'm going, oh, this is great. You don't hear Hank every day. This is great. And I pull onto the bridge, and I'm just getting towards like the hump of the bridge, and I'm going, wait a minute, that's not Hank Williams. And then I went, and the guy said Blue Northern. I went, oh, that must be that Billy Cowsill guy I've heard of, who's new to town and took up with this band. Oh, wow.
Being on the brink of success a few times and nominated for a Canadian Country Music Award couldn't gloss over the fact that by January 1982, Billy's substance abuse issues had come to the fore. He wore out his welcome in Blue Northern and left the band. By December of that year, the band was done. It was the chance meeting with Mitchell that would provide Billy with his next adventure.
I used to take my kids to school and stop off at my pal Mitzi's place for coffee and a tote before I went home and started the day, kind of thing. And so I go to Mitzi's, and I noticed, I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I noticed this pair of cowboy boots outside Mitzi's bedroom door, and she's making coffee, and And I remember no prompting. I just said to myself, that must be Billy Cowsill's shoes. And then, we're having coffee, and he gets up, and that's how, I met him. He comes in, staggers in, and we start chatting, and everything. And guitars come out, and we start playing, and it wasn't long. We said, we should do this again,
They began a run at a restaurant called Trimble's. Word spread week to week until patrons were lining up around the block to hear, as Lindsay puts it, our strangely compelling little combo.
It's just Billy and me. And we playing some songs. And the guy says, oh, that's great. We'll come back next weekend. So we did. And the next weekend, this woman that Billy and I both knew comes in and sits down at a table fairly in front of us with a guy. And so we play. And after we finish, we go sit down and how'd you do's and all that. And she says, oh, you guys are great. She says, but you need a bass player. And, an upright bass player, he'd be really good. And we said, yeah, that would be really good. But if a guy walked in with a bass right now, I'd say, sure, come on, let's go play. But really, we don't make enough money. And so the guy she's sitting with says, oh, I got one in my car. Big bass, right? And so I just set myself up so if a guy walked in with a big bass, we'd let him play. So he comes in, and that's Elmar. And we go out and we play. Never met him before. And he jumps in on the harmonies, and it's just fantastic. We said, what are you doing next week? And that lasted for forever.
So where did the name Trainwreck come from?
Somebody came up to on one of our first gigs and said, you guys sound like a train wreck. In a nice way.
Yeah.
And we said, oh, well, that's a great name.
Yeah.
It was originally Billy Mitchell's Trainwreck. You might have seen that. That was because people just wanted to idea it. But then it just cooked the Trainwreck.
The band played around the Vancouver area for the next decade. They had some high-profile gigs, including opening for the likes of Roy Orbison, Gene Pitney, and one star-studded Commodore gig with the Shirelles, Del Shannon, and Bo Diddley. Lindsay described the band as a minimalist outfit with acoustic and electric guitar and a doghouse bass, but the numbers could grow depending on the gig.
We could do 3.
Yeah.
We could do 4. We could do 5, 6.
It depended on the gig.
But what bottom line is, we could bring it down to next to nothing.
Yeah.
And that was always the joy of playing with that group, was being underestimated.
Oh.
An upright bass, an acoustic guitar, and you can't fill a dance floor without a drummer. Well, I just said, have you ever seen Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee? I remember just those two old guys at the Commodore, both sitting down, old guys, dance floors jumping. Sure you can. Anyway, and so people, and so I love being, underestimated is not the right word, but
There's no expectation.
Yeah, and it's just
And
like,
then all of a
that
sudden-
can't work, but it does.
Yeah. It was hard to classify the band, rockabilly, but as Lindsay says, with a shitload of folk, R&B, Britpop, and old school country and western thrown in. And when they had a full band, man, could they rock out.
Sick and hard alone, deep in dark despair. Everyone thought on me. Tell me where is she where? But she says to you,
Billy's time in Vancouver, he became known for doing the Dead Guys set.
It's mostly dead guys, kids. They're gone. Hearts of gold and shit for brains, but that's what you get in the business. So
I asked Lindsay about that. Did the Dead Guys set originate from Trainwreck, or was that something Billy had before?
No, that was a train wreck.
Yeah, and did that come from him, or just kind of joint?
Well, it just turned out most of the songs we played were dead people. It wasn't a rule or anything that we only played dead guys, because we'd joke, we'd say, we'd do a song by Roy Orbison because his hair is dead. Because he used to wear some, so it used to look like it, you know. Or he's going to do a song because we wish he was dead.
Here's a Merle Haggard song. He's not dead, but Buck Owens wishes he was because he stole his wife. Here's another Brenda Lee song. She ain't dead, but her career is really dwindling. Moving on to light aircraft hits Mountain. Here's that DC-3 crash I was telling you about. Have another line, Rick. We're going down anyway. What does it matter? The engine's burning. Quick, get the bass.
They recorded extensively, but sadly, the bulk of the material remains unreleased. Occasionally, things do show up on YouTube.
Oh, the Showboat. Isn't that a great? Too bad the video quality.
I know.
But the performance is fantastic, and the venue is it was a CKVU. That's why it was video.
Well, that's alright, Mom. That's alright for you. That's alright, Mom. Anyway you want to. Well, that's alright. It's alright. That's alright. It's alright. Well, that's alright, Mom. Anyway you do.
Trainwreck not only played around Vancouver, they'd venture to Calgary and Edmonton as well. Lindsay recalls one show in Edmonton in particular.
We were playing up in Edmonton with the Trainwreck. We had an afternoon gig downtown. We're playing a set, and there's this young woman sitting cross-legged on in the dance floor, just sort of head bopping, you know, and then we take a break, and somebody says, "Oh, the Billy's gonna sing a song with this gal," and it was Kathy Dawn, Katie Lang, and he wanted them singing an Everly's together. Oh, just like that. Yeah, but it was this Curly's up, standing up kind of time. Like, she was hip to Billy from his previous, when he'd come down from the north. Spent some time in Edmonton before coming to Vancouver. They had crossed paths.
Back in Vancouver, it was at a restaurant called Mama Gold's where another interesting encounter took place.
Mama Gold's. Billy and I are playing there when we're just the two of us. And Willie McCalder comes in to visit. And he's always welcome to play piano. But he had this young guy with him, Colin James, just fresh in town. And Willie said, "Oh, can Colin sing a song? Sit in?" And we said, "Normally, no, but seeing as how it's your recommendation, Will, yes, we'll go." And anyway, what would you like to sing, young fella? And he said, "Reet Petite." And we went, "Oh," and he nailed it. Really? Yes. Frickin' nailed it. And the next 2 weeks, it was people trying to sign Colin. Yeah. You know, I mean, I got on it right away. I went to the studio the next morning and said, we need to get this guy in the studio.
When Lindsay went back to tour with the Reformed Prism, Colin James filled in on guitar.
He took over from me because I had to leave. Because that's when Prism 2 came along, and I couldn't turn the money down. I had, kids, and so I had to leave town. And for the first bit, it was just a sub. I got the gig back when I came to town, but Prism 2 just kept going.
Here's the Trainwreck live in July 1985 with Colin James on guitar and Billy in fine voice.
Only you can make the world seem right. Only you can as bright. Only you and you alone. Every like you do, and fill my heart with love.
While the train wreck continued in the mid to late 80s, Billy, who had a deep love of surf music, also played in a band called the Surf Kings with drummer John Cody.
It would be 86, 87, 88, around there. What this was called the Surf Kings, and it was like a high-end surf band doing Beach Boys and Jan and Dean. So we had Billy, we had a magnificent bass player, Rick Enns, who was legendary in Vancouver from the Tom Northcott Trio, United Empire Loyalist, and many others, and he just sang like a bird. Al Harlow from Prism on second guitar, and different keyboard players.
It wasn't just having played with the Beach Boys, it was Billy's love for that music that drove him to excel.
Billy knew that stuff so well, and was such a taskmaster to make sure the harmonies were right. But it was a joy to work with him at every point. It was nothing but just a gas, like such high standards.
Although the band knew their stuff, things didn't always go smoothly.
We opened for Georgia Satellite at 86th Street in Vancouver. We finished our first set. The second set was to start with I Get Around, which has all that harmony right off the top. So I counted in, because it's going to be 1, 2, 3, bang, in the whole band. But nobody was sure of their parts, so it was 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, and then dead silence. Every vocalist stayed out of the way, listening for the other. That was an excellent start to that set.
John describes the band's stage show at the time.
It was goofy, but it was a whole show. We'd throw we'd do Jan and Dean's Popsicle and throw popsicles to the audience, and beach balls, all that sort of stuff.
The trend in nostalgia bands hadn't hit, so the Surf Kings were doing something quite unique for the time.
It was really before the oldies thing was as big as it became, so it was still kind of unique. There was no one else doing what we did.
For the band members, it wasn't a regular gig, more of a side project. The set list had its challenges.
Well, I mean, we all agreed, like, we did stuff like Caroline No. You know, we did the tougher stuff because we could.
Wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't just surf hit after surf hit. It was some of the good stuff.
Sadly, they never did any recording.
No, we never were in the studio. No one ever recorded us as far as I can tell. We never did TV, anything like that. Like, to mount it, it was tough because it took a lot of work, to get all those harmonies tight. And so there was a lot of rehearsal with Billy. And it needed to be. You're trying to cover some of the toughest harmonies ever.
Watching Billy in action, I'm sure you'd pick up a thing or two.
And listening, if someone goes sharp, you know how to react to it. You don't just say that's wrong, you fix it with them.
Right.
And he had, a family, like the Beach Boys had, like the Bee Gees had. Like, what a great place to learn harmony. And that's what, when we worked with him, that's what he was doing, pulling every voice and just making it sound incredibly rich.
John gives us his take on the band.
First, I love that kind of music. I've always loved Brian Wilson since I was a kid. And so to honor it and do it well was just fantastic, and to have that caliber of musician in the band, it was just an absolute joy for all of us to be working at that level. I mean, it was odd because it wasn't original, but it was as good as any original act I was ever in. I saw lots of bands try to do it and completely miss it, never get close. And it was so different for everybody. It wasn't like Billy was playing with other surf bands, or any of us were. So it was a labor of love. And so again, we wanted to do it right, and did.
Eventually they drifted apart. I wondered if Billy's departure was acrimonious.
Not at all. It was not a regular gig. We might go 6 months between gigs. He probably got busy with Trainwreck or something. There was never anything like, okay, see you around. It was nothing like that. We just eventually were both real busy.
Billy stopped playing with the Surf Kings in 1988, and the Trainwreck underwent another transformation.
Then Colin's career picked up, so he had to be subbed, and that was Dan Cassidy.
But I guess what was happening, that was kind of when Colin he was pretty young, but he was starting to develop his own career.
Yes.
So that's where a guy like me fit in. I was more on the loose. And so, what's that guy, Luke Doucette? Luke actually did a couple of gigs.
Oh, okay.
With at Darby's.
Dan recalls Billy seeing him play.
I was playing at Darby Dawes Pub. He came to the bar, and we're playing away, and I'm looking, this Billy Causel's watching us, man. We knew who he was and how great he was and everything. And he was digging it, he's smoking his cigarette, and, I'm like, wow. And yeah, he talked to us on the break, and he remarked about my guitar playing. He says, yeah, man, you're cool guitar playing. Very nice, great singing, Bob, and, whatever. It was really nice.
Dan remembers the first time he worked with Bill.
I'd actually done a recording session with Bill, which is interesting. Jack Lavin, when Jack used to run the jams down at the Yale, he ended up producing some country record at Bullfrog Studios. And Billy was on the gig, playing rhythm guitar and singing harmony, and I was playing Telecaster.
Dan was traveling in similar circles, and by chance got to know Colin and Elmar as well.
I ended up living above Olympia Pizza, and Elmar, the bass player, lived there. Colin James lived there, and Lindsay went off to play with Prism, and Elmar, he knew me. I'd been playing around and whatever, and he said, "Would you be into doing some gigs with us? Because that's shit, man." Yeah, you think? Yeah, I'm into that, and I ended up doing on and off, mostly on, about 2.5 years with Bill. 88 is when I did that first session, and then 89, 90, 91.
I asked Dan if they had regular gigs.
Yeah, there was a bit of a circuit, it was a thing, and it was, it kept us, playing, and we'd do the Fairview, and we had a regular gig at Darby's every Tuesday. We also played the Rusty Gull in North Vancouver.
Did they spend any time working on the set list?
That was the strange thing, is there was no real rehearsal with Bill. I remember when I first started, and Elmar, I said, well, so, we're going to get together, we're going to work out stuff. He says, no, you'll figure it out. I'm like, okay. And it was a good call, because I am kind of the right guy to do it. We would do things like, rockabilly tunes, and or we'd play Secret Agent now.
There's a man who leads a life of danger. Everyone he meets, he's a stranger. Be careful what you say. Give yourself away. Odds are you won't live to see tomorrow. A secret.
They'd done the solo, they'd done the James Burton solo, whatever, and then he'd go, or something, and he'd just go, and just play, Billy's just an encyclopedia, and he would pull shit out of the blue, smoke gets in your eyes.
When your heart's on fire, you must realize smoke gets in your eye.
What? He dedicated Smoke Gets in Your Eyes to the cook at Darby's.
That's for James in the kitchen.
I'm sorry, whatever.
Sorry. So sorry that I was such a fool. I didn't know love could be so true. Yeah.
Return to sender,
Tomorrow
But I rolled with the punches pretty good. Before they packaged him and they did the Blue Shadows, which was original music, and we were doing original music as well, but when he was just doing whatever the hell he wanted to do, he'd do Catch the Wind.
When the sundown pales the sky, I wanna hide a while behind your smile. Everywhere I look, your eyes are fine. Standing in your arms, is where I wanna be. I long to be, but I may as well try and catch the wind. I like that.
You know, he'd just do whatever he thought. He'd do a Marty Robbins tune, he'd do whatever, and I was ready for it, right? And, you know, I don't claim to be the greatest guitar player in the world or anything, but I was the right guy at the time. As Lindsay was the right guy at the time, as Colin was the right guy. Mm-hmm. Everybody who played with Bill learned and was influenced. I mean, he had a huge impact on me. I mean, my playing got better when I was in his presence. It just, you know, because he was incredible. I mean, that's the thing about Bill, is that, you know, the thing is, he was so into the particular voices. You know, like if he did a voice, he nailed it. He studied it.
Right.
You know, he was always Billy, but he could be somebody else.
And his between-song banter could be hilarious.
He was sort of like a Las Vegas comedian. Don Rickles and Hank Williams, you know, somewhere in between there, you know.
Here's going out to the women that are working this place. You'll notice they're busting their ass to make sure that your every whim and desire is taken care of. Peeled grapes. The peeled grapes tonight are just $4.50 a pop. Also, they're slaving while you're raving, you know, so make sure you take a little extra care. Throw them an extra buck or two, you know what I mean? They're Billy's kids, they're my kids, you know. Jerry's got his kids, you know. They get all the big, hip people to come on for millions of dollars, chrome-plated wheelchairs, and it's, you know, it's great for the kids. I'm glad, you know, that, like, Billy's kids really need your help. We do want to send them to that cowboy camp for underprivileged debutantes, and only your support can help. Horseback riding, canoeing, you know, the kids need a break, you know, they need a break every now and then. And culminating with the annual Quaalude hunt, and it's a real blast, and I don't want to let them down.
He would go off on these things that were just hilarious.
Aside from the live recordings, the band did record some demos in the studio.
But we ended up doing recordings at Larry Wanakis' office. He had a studio. That was really good. And we did a bunch of demos. When we recorded those things, I was a part of the band.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I was a full band member. And the idea was the demos were, you know, that we were going to, you know, do something.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, there were problems, you know, as far as the business went. And I'm sure that, you know, in the wisdom that was behind it, they realized they needed a foil for Bill, and they needed to, you know, focus. And it's unfortunate some of these tunes were never released, because I think they're actually pretty good.
Oh yeah,
you know, really good. But they never surfaced in the Blue Shadows catalog.
Dan points out a couple of the demos that he played on.
In my Western days, I played on.
I remember you. Do you still have my name? I wasn't there to help you through the changes. Way out getting high on the rock and roll train. In my Western days, I held all the paces. In my Western days, I won all the races. In my Western days, I went back to my hometown searching for you.
She never spoke Spanish to me. I played on.
I met her in Old Mexico. She was laughing sad in love in a smoky bar, so no one could see. Her favorite poets all agree Spanish is the loving tongue, but she never spoke Spanish to me.
John Johnny's guitar I played on.
Billy wrote Johnny's guitar, and it comes with quite a story. It was around July 1971. Billy was cutting some demos at the Record Plant studio in New York with engineer Jack Douglas. Jack had been one of the engineers when John Lennon was recording his Imagine album. Here's Billy's explanation from a 2004 interview. "I was in the recording studio," Billy said. "I got to do these demos and I rented this guitar, and the machine heads were stripped. So I was about to fling it across the studio. Jack comes on the intercom and says, 'Wait a minute, Billy.' He went in the back and brought out this leather soft case. I said, 'Thanks, Jack.' So I peeled it down, and this odor of beautiful wood came out, and it said Everly Gibson on it. And I said, 'Everly Gibson?' Well, I kind of know that there are only 3 real ones. Don's got one, McCartney's got one. To tell you how out of it I was, I said, 'Jack, whose is this?' He goes, 'That's John's.' Well, I lost it. John Lennon, he had just finished the Imagine album. Here I was, hopeless, helpless, out of my mind, still rocking, and someone hands me my hero's axe. That was a turning point for me of coming back to sanity, back to reality, and back to this journey that I've been on ever since." Billy used the guitar for the session, left a thank you note in the guitar case, and wrote the song Johnny's Guitar.
Flat on my back and at the bottom sinking. I never thought I'd ever fall that far. I never knew that I'd play Johnny's guitar. Till she left, I never saw it coming. And then again, I never looked too far. I never dreamed that I'd play Johnny's guitar. I thought I was abandoned. She didn't think I knew. Man, I was feeling stranded till Johnny came ringing through. I wouldn't say that I was truly happy, exactly crazy about the way things are. But it's okay, 'cause I played Johnny's guitar. Hey, Johnny! I couldn't understand it.
Lindsay played on a couple.
Yeah.
He played on Johnny's guitar. He played the solo.
Okay.
But I played all of the rest of it.
Dan talks about the relationship between Billy and Elmar.
Elmar Spanier was the guy who was he was like me and Bob. One guy's taking care of the PA and the getting there, and the other guy's the singer, you know? And it was a symbiotic kind of thing, right? You know, I was the guy in the middle. It was funny because those guys would scrap, you know? Like, here's a good one. We're playing at I don't know, I think we were playing at the Fairview. And Elmar would play string bass as well as he would play electric bass, right? And, you know, with string bass, there's no frets, right? Tuning is your ear.
Yep.
And Billy's ear was like radar. The guy couldn't sing out of tune. Here's the thing. Bill's guitar could have 4 strings on it, be out of tune, and he was singing tune. It was just, he had radar. I mean, it was just, It was sick, actually. And it was real tough when you're playing guitar, believe me, with that. But anyway, with Elmar was playing the thing, and he turns over to Elmar and says, "Where's the chalk?" And I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Chalk marks for where the pitches are on the neck, right? And Elmar's like, fuck you, you know.
Elmar, if I've done anything, or if I ever do anything again, man, I'd like to just dedicate this, man, to you. Say it one time and one time only, and only the way I can, man, with all my heart and soul in my song, man. This is going out to you for every time I've done you wrong or will ever do you wrong. And Lord knows, yes.
Before you sing this song, Billy, there's one thing I'd like to say before you sing this song to me. If you ever do anything wrong, I just want you to just fuck off, right?
They had a love-hate relationship that was amazing. I was in the middle of it, and you know, it was difficult.
There were times when Bill's back left him unable to perform.
Bill had a thing where he had like sciatica, so that there would be times when he couldn't play, you know, because that would happen. I got an offer to play. I'd played on a couple of records with a guy named Fred Penner, and Fred was going to do some Canadian touring, and Bill was out of it, so I accepted playing with Fred. The transition between playing with Billy and playing with Fred was like radical, you know. And it's also the gigs that I did with Fred were like, you know, the Jubilee Auditorium, the Orpheum, you know, really high end. But, you know, they were also early in the day, like really early in the day, you know, because it was kids.
Yeah.
You know, so it was like everything was upside down and you couldn't swear, you know. I mean, you know, so it's like from playing with Bill to playing with
night and day.
It was really interesting.
Dan explains how his time in the band came to an end.
I ended up working at Long McQuaid, actually. I had a day gig at Long McQuaid on 4th Avenue. I would buy strings and stuff for Bill because Bill would never get it together. And he'd owe me like for it. And I got kind of a little pissed off because he'd owe me a little bit of money. And at a certain point, I complained to the office that, you know, that a lot of us that, you know, I needed some cash because, you know, and I guess it got back to Bill, and Bill just wasn't happy. Wasn't happy. You know, he was like that, right? And it became a thing, and, you know, you're out of here. And that hurt me.
No doubt.
It hurt me. It hurt me very much. And that's what was interesting was I was down at Hogan's doing something else, and Bill came in, and he was just 3 sheets to the wind. And he came and said, "Hey, don't worry, Danny, man. You're going to do all sorts of great shit. You're a great player. You know, it's just the way things go. It's rock and roll." It's like, and I'm thinking, but he was right. He was a guy who knew show business. I knew a bit about it, getting trampled on in show business, but Bill definitely knew about it. And but it was hard. It was hard for me.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, but it also made sense to me as time kind of. I mean, I had tons of gigs.
Dan reflects on Billy's songwriting.
Some of the lyrics that guy wrote, man, they were really deep.
Yeah.
They were deep. Yeah, I'm tearing up, man.
Uh-oh.
No, it's okay. It's all right. You know, it's I miss him. You know, he was an amazing guy, and I was blessed, man. You know, he affected me musically and personally, and you know, and there was heartaches, but that's rock and roll.
Dan sums up the complexities that were Billy Cowsill.
You know, Bill was a very complex guy. He was really intelligent, incredibly talented, incredibly troubled, you know, from his family and all that. You know, it explained a lot, but it didn't necessarily excuse it. You know, I was treated good and I was treated bad. You know, but that's what Bill did. You know, Bill was like that. I saw him put the boots to a guy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Don't mess with Mr. Boot. You know, he's some drunken idiot, you know, you know. And he just like he put it right into the guy's chest.
Wow.
Boom, the guy went back. And his executive functions were sometimes not working completely, and his, what do you call that, impulse control? You know, it was bipolar. Right? So, and he had substance problems.
And what about his connection to music?
He was rock and roll. Billy was rock and roll. Billy was country. Billy was music. He was possessed by music. Music was everything to him. It was his channel. It was his salvation, but it was also his burden. I think when you've been famous, it's a tough one. He burned a lot of bridges, but you know, but he was respected and loved, you know, by a lot of people. And his story is tragic. You know, it's like the greatest heights and the greatest depths.
Dan makes a poignant observation.
There's a guy who has had more talent than anybody I've ever known, who did incredible things. But when he died, what did he have? A pair of boots, a couple of shirts, a pair of jeans, and a guitar.
Yeah.
He didn't have anything, right? But people loved him.
Some final thoughts from Dan.
I am honored, number one, to have played with Bill. I'm honored that you asked me. I just hope that people will remember Billy in the light that should be remembered in, as being truly one of the greatest singers, one of the greatest talents ever. I honestly believe that. He's up there with Roy. He's up there with Hank. In my estimation.
Billy Cowsill was a talented but complex individual. It's a lot to consider. In the next Cowsill episode, I'll take a look at his time in the Blue Shadows. I'm going to end this episode on a lighthearted note, as Dan shares with us the nickname given to Billy during his time in LA in the early 1970s. That made me chuckle.
There was all that crew of people, you know, like Waddy Wachtel and all these guys were hanging out. That's when he got the name Silly Cowbell.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you with Vagabond, a song Billy wrote that really sums him up. This has been Noise from the Cranium. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
Vagabond, you never settle down. You've just been used like an endless merry-go-round. You don't have a place that you call home. You're a vagabond, drifting like a rolling stone. You had a woman's love, but everything went wrong. You just up and down, and now you're singing a different song. Like a wayward wind, a child of the underground. You're a vagabond, you'll never settle down.